Hey, Chelsea here from Making Manzanita. Today we are tackling how to tile on a concrete subfloor. Hey guys, today we are going to be installing the tile in our entryway here, a very small entryway, in our living room as a part of our living room makeover that we are doing. So the base of our living room is concrete, and there was tile here before previously that we removed, and we have a whole post about how to remove tile from your floors if you're interested in learning about that, so I'll link that here. But this is the tile that we decided to put in the entryway. So it's a large format tile, so you can see here it looks like smaller tile because there's a little groove here that makes it look like they're smaller, but each piece is nice and large, and I love the colors in here. I think it works great with the laminate floor that we just installed. It's a nice color contrast there. And one thing that I like about it specifically for the entryway is that it has a little bit of a rustic look, and that was important because this is going to hide dirt and dust and stuff that comes in from our feet outside. So that was something that I was looking at some other tiles, but they were more of a lighter color and didn't have as much variation, which I know would mean that they would show a lot more dirt than these will. So I love them. I love that star pattern, and it's kind of it's got a little boho look to it, which I love. So we're going to be teaching you all about how to install the tile. We'll go through the entire process, and then we're also going to have a whole separate video all about how to cut the tile specifically and how to use a wet tile saw. So if you're interested in that part, be sure to check out that video. So let's jump in. Now, we have a whole ebook that we created all about tile for newbies. And one of my steps for beginners that want to learn how to tile is to start small and start dry. And what I mean by that is start with a relatively small project. Don't start with your whole kitchen if it's the first time tiling. And start dry, meaning not like a bathroom, basically. There's a lot of extra steps that go in with waterproofing and making sure that tile is perfect in a bathroom. And I think to make it a little less overwhelming for beginners, it's best to start dry and start small. And so tiling an entryway is a great first tile project for a beginner. Let's start with the supplies. Here is what you will need. First, you'll need a tile saw. This is to make the cuts along the edge of the tiled area, and we are using this one from Harbor Freight. Next, you will need tile. We are working specifically today with large format tile. Large format tile is anything that measures more than 15 inches on one side. Next, you will need mortar. That is going to be the glue that holds the tile in place, and you want to be sure you're using the right type of mortar. We're using a large format tile in a gray color, and this is specifically made to work with our type of tile. So you want to be sure to read up, make sure you're working with the right type of tile mortar for the tile that you're using. Next, you will need a mixing paddle. That's to mix up the thin set, and you will attach this to a drill. It's really important though that the drill you're using is corded and not battery powered. Next, you'll need a sponge to wipe things down. You'll need a couple of 5-gallon buckets. Tile spacers, we highly recommend these ones with the wedge and clip. It also helps to level the tile as you go. Let's get started. The first step is to prepare your floor for tile. Now, we are working with a concrete subfloor, so we didn't have to worry about installing a concrete backer base, but if you discover that you have wood subfloors, you definitely want to add a concrete backer to the floor before installing the tiles, and we have a whole separate post about how to do that if you're interested. Next, you want to find the midpoint line for your area and snap a chalk line there. It's important to keep things nice and straight as you go, so that chalk line is definitely handy to keep things nice, level, and square. Next, you can move on to laying the large format tiles. Now, before you start, you may want to dry fit your tiles first, just to make sure that there's not going to be any super tiny cuts on the edges. Next, you want to mix up your thin set mortar. Be sure you're only mixing up enough to use within 20 or 30 minutes before it starts to harden. We have a whole separate video about how to mix up thin set mortar in a separate video, so be sure to check that out if you're interested. Then you can begin putting your thin set down on your surface. Now you just kind of plop it down on the surface and spread it out with the straight edge of your trowel, and you want to try to get it as flat as you can, and then you'll switch your trowel to the notched side, and we are using a 1/2 inch square notched trowel for this. You want to hold it at about 45 degrees to the floor and then run the trowel over the thin set to make ridges, and try to do this in straight lines. You don't want to have like big curves or waves in the ridges. It's best to do this just in a straight line. Now, it is recommended before you set your tiles into place, especially for large format tiles like this, to back butter them, which is what we're doing here. Now, back buttering is just adding a thin layer of the thin set directly to the back of the tile before setting it into place. It helps the tiles bond better and improves your mortar coverage, which is pretty important when you're working with large format tile like this. It also helps fill in all those little ridges and textures and pores on the back of the tile. To back butter, all you do is just grab a glob of that thin set with your trowel and spread it on the back of your tile with the flat side of the trowel in an even layer. It's kind of just like you're putting butter on toast. That's why they call it back buttering. Next, you can gently set the tile straight down on top of the mortar, and with an even pressure, push down the tile and give it a little shimmy to work out any of the air bubbles and flatten the mortar underneath. These clip and wedge spacers that we are using not only give you the right spacing between your tiles, which you'll grout later, but they also help keep the tiles level with each other. Preventing lippage, which is just a fancy word for when the tiles aren't level with each other, is always important when you're working with tile. But I'd say that it's even more important when you are installing tile on your floors, because you want to prevent a tripping hazard, of course. And getting the tiles even with each other is even harder when you're working with large format tiles like this, because it's harder to make small adjustments due to the size of the large tile. So that's why these wedge spacers are so worth it when you're working with tile like this. Next, you can just continue installing the tile on the floor. For those tile levels, the white part of the spacer goes at the end of the tile and just tucks underneath, and then that yellow wedge slides into the hole of the spacer and clicks into place while pushing down the tiles next to each other to ensure that they are level with each other. When it comes time to get to the edges, you will need to cut down the tiles to fit along the edge, unless of course you pre-cut your tiles beforehand if you were dry fitting all of your tile. Now you want to measure the space you need to fill that edge and then subtract the amount you'll use for the spacer and cut your tiles using a wet tile saw. Now we have a whole post and video in the works showing you exactly how to use a tile saw, but it is pretty simple. You just want to be sure you work slowly to prevent chipping, and if you do have any chipping take place on the tile, you can smooth it out with a sanding stone like this. After all of the tile has been installed, it's very important that you stay off of it for at least 24 hours. This will give the mortar a chance to dry. And then after the 24 hours has gone by, you can remove the spacers and moving on to grout. Now you want to apply the grout with a rubber grout float held at 45-degree angle to the floor and push the grout into all of the gaps. Be sure to work in small sections and make sure that every joint is filled. Wait about 20 to 30 minutes and then wipe it all down with a damp sponge to rinse away any remaining grout left on the tile. Now, I know this is just a picture of us grouting another tile floor, but I was actually gone while Logan was grouting, so I didn't get any videos of him doing it this time. But the process is pretty simple. Just be sure that you get all of the remaining grout off of the tile and just use that sponge and wipe the tile clean when you're done. Now, for the edges of our tile, we chose to use this 5-in-1 molding to trim out the edges. It matches the laminate that we have installed in the rest of the living room, and it was a great option for us. The hardest part about this was honestly just screwing the track into the concrete subfloors, because I don't know if you know, but concrete is pretty hard to drill holes in. So that was the hardest part of this, but we ended up getting it done, and this 5-in-1 molding was actually pretty cool because you can use it in a variety of different ways. All you do is use the little cutter that comes with the molding, and you can just trim off the extra edge there on the side to use it as a flat molding. But there are like five different ways to use this molding, so it is a great option if you're trying to transition tile to another surface. So after we cut it down, that's what it looked like when it was nice and flat, and it was ready to be snapped into the track that we have laying in between the edge there. All right, are you ready to see the finished tile entryway? Now remember, this is how it all started. Before we installed the tile, we were just left with that concrete subfloor after we had removed the old tile, and this was the tile that we chose. Now let's see how it looks now. Here is the finished tiled entryway. I think it looks pretty freaking amazing. Am I right? I am obsessed with the pattern of this large format tile. I love the star pattern and the colors. I think it adds so much fun visual interest to the room, but I'm curious to know what you guys think. So definitely let us know in the comments below. I think that the trim on the edges finished off the space great. That molding is perfect to transition the tile to the laminate flooring, and I'm absolutely loving it. Now we have all of our supplies and the specific tile that we use linked in the description below, so feel free to check those out if you're interested in any of these products. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to let us know. We would really appreciate if you just push like on this video and then leave us a comment and let us know what you liked. If you have any other questions, also just drop those in the comments and we're happy to answer those for you. And while you're here, we would love it if you would subscribe to our channel. We are putting out weekly renovating and DIY videos and teaching you everything we're learning as we renovate our fixer-upper. Hope you guys have a great day. See you next time.